Let's discuss child behavior problems and solutions. I'm Nicholeen Peck, and I teach all over the world about parenting, good communication, how to build strong family bonds, calmness, child development, and education, all through the lens of the principle self-government. And in this video, we're talking about the popular childhood problems and what self-government solutions you can use to solve those problems. This channel is called Teaching Self-Government because I take a self-government view of problems and solutions. And this video, we're going to be talking broadly about some main problems that parents are facing and what solutions you can keep in mind so that that problem doesn't have to continue. Let's talk a little bit about self-government. Self-government is a process of evaluating yourself, your behaviors, making a plan for yourself, following through, self-directing, and self-correcting. And it's not just for children. Children and parents all need to be able to govern themselves better. So let's talk about some things that are problems that children may need to learn how to self-govern or what types of problems to solve. Many children struggle nowadays with attachment. They don't bond well to other people. They isolate themselves, don't discuss openly, don't want to take responsibility for problems. Children nowadays are sometimes arguing, they're getting overly emotional, they're fighting each other, they're fighting their parents. There's this sense of pushing back on society to try to get their way. They blame other people, so again, not taking personal responsibility there. There's also a lot of depression, there's anxiety, there are increased problems due to those things, and for sure, those things are on the rise. But let's talk a little bit about the addiction, especially. Why are people falling into addiction? Well, because they're not able to give themselves no answers and follow through, or instruct themselves and follow through. There's a lack of self-direction that's going on, which makes them vulnerable to just any passion, whim, craving idea to end up taking over their days and their behaviors. Now, people say, well, yeah, but my child has ADHD and they're just impulsive anyway. Maybe that might be true, but for many years I did therapeutic treatment care for troubled teens, and all of them were neurodiverse except for one, and they all had severe behavioral issues and trauma in their background as well. And guess what? Even with neurodiversities, they were able to learn to give themselves no answers, to give themselves instructions, to control some of those impulses. It took a lot of practice, but it was absolutely possible. So I've kind of run the gamut here on the list of problems that we might be facing, but if you've subscribed to this channel already, then you know I really like to get to the solutions. And so let's talk about solutions. What can you do to help your family, to help your children, to improve your parenting so that you can help your child overcome some of those problems? Well, the first thing is you need to take a deliberate approach. These types of problems are not solved accidentally. A person has to decide to solve the problem and take deliberate, active steps toward the problem solving. Many people don't know how to solve problems well, and so one of the mistakes that they run into is they get overly emotional. If our children are emotional and we get emotional with them and get sucked into that, that does not help them find security and foundation or appropriate bonding, and can sometimes actually create a worse problem instead of helping them solve their problem. So understanding how a problem is solved is really vital. There are two different elements that are required for self-government. One is the appropriate type of tone or feeling that you carry with you, such as calmness or maybe frustration, anxiety, stress. Those are two different feelings or tones that a person might have. And then the second thing is structure. How are we going to go about the process of solving problems? What are we going to do there? So first, let's talk about tone. Let's talk about calmness. A person can choose to be calm. It's not something that just happens to them. So when you choose to be calm, that means you understand what you feel like when you really are calm. When a person is fully calm, that means their prefrontal cortex is able to do all of their thinking. They don't feel emotional, they don't feel worried, they don't take things personally. Instead, they process, plan. When you are calm, you are doing front brain work, and your brain is freed up to do planning and problem solving. Those are the main processes that you are experiencing during that time. If you struggle with calmness as a parent, it's going to be difficult to teach them to be calm because they will be following your example. And there is a boomerang effect related to calmness. Whatever you throw out is likely what you're going to get back. Now, we could use another word for that called power struggle, but when it comes to calmness, it also can work in a very productive way because you can send out something good and get something good back in return as well. This doesn't mean you have complete control over another person and their tone or their calmness, but we do need to teach them what calmness feels like. And in all of the skills of self-government, some of those first steps of every skill help the child repeatedly address their calmness or lack of and be able to analyze that and address it. So calmness is important. On my website, teachingselfgovernment.com, there is a full Calm Parenting Toolkit. This is not the entire TSG parenting course, but it is a good beginner course that will give you 10 tools for calmness to help you with those tone elements. But we can't just talk about tone, we've got to talk about structure as well. What type of structure is needed for a person to solve the type of problems that we have identified here? Well, a self-government structure is going to include pre-teaching skills ahead of time and giving everybody the opportunity to choose to either follow the skills or not, and then to follow up with some consistent teaching and feedback on what decision was made so that they can properly learn to self-assess for the future. Because remember, the goal of self-government is that each child will learn how to assess themselves. So what are some of these skills that they need for success? Well, there are the 4 basic skills of self-government, which I go into great detail about in my TSG parenting course on my website, teachingselfgovernment.com. But the 4 basic skills are following instructions, accepting no answers and criticism, accepting consequences, and disagreeing appropriately. Then there's the 5 teaching styles that parents need in order to help guide their children toward using those 4 skill sets. And when things don't go right, how to help them fix the problem in the future. Pre-planning and preparing yourself for what skills you're going to use, and then preparing your child for what skills you will use to solve the problems, is really empowering for you and for them, and will help you follow through and be consistent in your parenting. If you are not consistent in your parenting, your child will manipulate you and keep finding new ways to just control you emotionally and push your buttons, which is what some people say. If you don't want that to happen, then you've got to maintain consistency and follow through with the plan that you decided. Now, one key thing that you can do as you follow through and create a plan for your family is involve them in the process. So come up with a family vision. I talk about that in my TSG parenting course for the future for your family, and then involve them in the process of adding some of their own tidbits or suggestions and comments about that family vision. Now you've got something that you're working toward as a group. This will be the picture that will help you know when you need to course correct and when things are going well. Having regular times to check up with your family about your relationships and your communication is vital for good self-government success. So making sure that you meet together often and aren't afraid to talk deliberately with each other is also good. Now, that said, we shouldn't spend time attacking others, pointing fingers, placing blame. This is not what good parenting interactions are about. They talk about what happened, maybe what the thought process was, and then how to help fix that thought process and that skill for the future. I think a lot of people spend time lecturing to their children and getting emotional at their children. This problem really is an issue with modern parents because we have not passed along good parenting skills over the generations, and so people are starting to get desperate, overwhelmed, tired, and they lack the skills. So what happens is they just try to talk their children to death, which is a little better than getting angry and going into power struggles with their children. So in order to combat those things, to decrease your own anxiety and your child's anxiety, again, we go back to creating a concrete plan, which includes skills and steps that we can follow. I know not everybody loves the idea of following steps. I'm definitely a fly by the seat of your pants type of a girl. I'm the type of person that when I do videos like this, I don't make a lot of notes for myself. I just say whatever needs to be said at the time. But when it comes to my parenting, I follow a plan. When it comes to my communications with the people that I love in my relationships, I keep myself organized with a certain set of skills and steps. I rein myself in. I govern myself because I have deep respect for them. And because I know that when I am predictable, then their anxiety levels will go down and they will be more successful. To help you with this, learn more about the skills and principles of self-government. You can find all of this information on my website, teachingselfgovernment.com. I will see you there.